Well, I want to paint you a picture. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet even touch the floor, your brain is already running. You're already thinking about what you didn't get done yesterday. You're already building the list of what you want to do today. You're already measuring the gap between where you are and where you think you should be. You're not lazy. You're not unmotivated. You're actually one of the most driven people in the room. You work harder than most people around you. And you've accomplished things that a lot of people haven't done. You've built things, you've started things, you've figured things out that most people would have given up on. And yet there's this feeling that follows you everywhere you go. This quiet voice underneath all of it that says it's not enough. You're not doing enough. You're not far enough along. You should be further. You should have more. You should be more. And the messed up part is the more you accomplish, the louder that voice gets. You thought hitting that goal would quiet it. You thought reaching that milestone would finally give you some peace, but it didn't. It just moved the target to the next line. And now you're staying at the finish line that already disappeared, and you're wondering why you can't just feel good about what you've built and what you've done and accomplished. If that's you, this podcast episode's for you. Thanks for tuning into the Matty McCurdy program. Before I talk about how to fight this feeling, we need to understand what we're actually fighting, because most people misdiagnose this and they think it's ambitious, or ambition rather. They think it's drive. They think it's just what it means to be a high achiever. And there is truth to that partially. Ambition is real. Drive is real. The desire to build something significant is all real. That's not the problem. Those are all good things. And it's actually a gift. It's something that some people don't even have. And they have to work to feel ambitious or feel like they should push themselves to accomplish something. But the never enough feeling, that's something different. That's not ambition. That's anxiety wearing ambition's clothes. Here's how you tell the difference. Ambition pulls you forward. It's energizing. It makes you excited about what you're building, what you're working towards. It makes the work feel meaningful, even when it's hard to accomplish. The never enough feeling, on the other hand, pushes from behind. It's exhausting. It makes you feel like you're running from something instead of towards something. And no matter how fast you seem to run, whatever you're running from keeps pace. It keeps chasing you down. Ambition says, I want to build something great. Never enough says, I'm not good enough until I do accomplish it or build something. That's really the distinction. And it matters quite a lot. It's enormous, actually, because if you're operating from the second place, if your whole engine is running on the fuel of I'm not enough yet, you're going to grind yourself into the ground. It's just not sustainable. And you're going to do it while achieving remarkable things that never actually satisfy you. And that's the unfortunate part, because if you can't, you can push for so long. If you think about it, you can push for so long. But if you're being pulled, right? If you're being pulled towards something, that doesn't require nearly as much effort and energy, so you can sustain it a lot longer. I want to go here because I think this is where it matters. The never enough feeling doesn't just show up. It got installed somewhere in your history. It got implemented there. Your childhood, your early experiences, the environment you grew up in, you learned that your value was connected to your performance. Maybe your parents taught you that, if I do certain things, I win their praise. Or if I accomplish certain goals or I do certain things around the house, then they care about me. And it's not intentional. I think it's something that just happens naturally as adults, as parents, as individuals. We tend to apply praise and we tend to apply satisfaction to achieving something. And a lot of times that can also be in the form of love. And as a child, you tend to see love as something you can earn. And that can be confusing. And I think that's where a lot of these issues stem from. And when you connect your performance to your value, right? Maybe it was a parent whose approval felt conditional, who was proud of you when you achieved when you achieved in the less present. So it may have been a parent who, maybe they were very present when you did something well, and maybe they weren't when you weren't doing well, or maybe you didn't achieve the goal, and so they kind of withdrew their love. That's possible. That happens a lot. But maybe it was even subtler than that. Maybe it was even less. Maybe nobody said anything directly, but you observed it, right? Maybe you absorbed it. Maybe you learned that the people who got attention in your life were the ones who accomplished more. The ones who got respected, who got loved, who made friends were the ones who seemed to be performing well. You see that all the time. High school the star athlete, right? The star quarterback. They're achieving so much. They're well liked. They're well received. People seem to want to be around them because they have this achievement. They performed well. And so you start chasing these accomplishments. You start chasing these achievements because you want to be accepted and you want to be liked and you want to feel the satisfaction and the validation from peers and people around you. And your brain, being the incredibly adaptive thing that it is, drew this conclusion: my worth is tied to what I produce. And that's how it's been filed. It's been filed away that way. And you've been operating from that file ever since. So every time you go to accomplish something, you're tying back into this idea that your worth is tied to what you can accomplish. So now that you're an adult, you're building real things, you're achieving real results, but underneath all of it, that old file is still running. And you keep saying, I'm not enough yet. I'm not good enough. And you keep going to try and prove it again and again and again. And you're only as good as the last result you had. What I want you to understand too is that this isn't a character flaw. This is programming. And like any programming, it can be rewritten. But first, you have to see it for what it is, right? You have to understand that it's not necessarily a good thought process. I've met with a lot of people who actually think that this idea is what makes them special, right? They were taught that, you know, they were taught that accepting the bare minimum or accepting what you achieved was settling. And when you settle, you're no longer growing. And that was a wrong thing to do. And the reality is that when you look at their history, when I started to talk to them a little bit more and uncover who they were and where they came from and who their parents were and who their parents were, right? Because that often dictates a lot of the upbringing and the ideas that we have is from our parents and then who their parents' upbringing as well. And what I realized was that they came from a household that was very much determined on this idea that your worth, your validation, your ability to do something was based on what you were able to achieve, and also that making mistakes was wrong. And if you made a mistake, if you failed, you were going to hear about it. And those two things combined, I see that a lot of times. You see these two ideas that failure and mistakes is end of the world and that you can't make a mistake because you look stupid or you're called out for it. So then you fear the mistake, and also not achieving or achieving results less than what was expected, having this expectation leads to a lack of love. And so these two things come together to cause this trait, this file, right, where you're unable to feel satisfaction in your achievements. So here's where the high achiever really falls into the trap. And I want to name it clear because once you see it, you can't unsee it, in my personal opinion. You've been operating under this belief probably for a long time that the feeling you're chasing is just one level away, one more goal, one more milestone, one more win, and I'll be happy. When I hit six figures, I'll feel successful. When I build a real team, I'll feel like a real leader. When I get to that revenue number, I'll feel like I made it. And you hit it, and maybe for a day or a week, you feel it, and then the target moves again. And suddenly you need the next level to feel what you thought the last level would give you. You never fully feel like you ever reached your target. There's actually a name for this in psychology. It's called the hedonic treadmill. And the research is unambiguous. Your brain adapts to new circumstances, positive or negative, and returns to baseline level of satisfaction within a relatively short, which means the feeling you're chasing by hitting the next goal, it's temporary. It always has been, and it always will be, as long as you're looking for the achievement itself. This is not me telling you not to achieve. You should keep on achieving. This is me telling you you've been looking for something real in the wrong place. And one thing I think we need to be clear on is that you're not always going to feel satisfaction. I think this idea that you're always going to be satisfied and always going to be happy is kind of silly, right? There's going to be times where you don't like what you're doing or you're unhappy with the outcome. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we adapt. But the feeling like you can never be satisfied, you can never be happy with the work you did, that's a completely other extreme, right? We kind of swing between these two extremes of being totally unhappy and never being satisfied, right? And that's a tough spot to be in. And so I think the key is one, realize that it's okay to be at baseline. It's okay to figure out I don't think as individuals we want to be swinging from side to side, from emotional extremes. That's not a good place to be in either. So you need to have kind of a stable emotional baseline that you're working from. But beyond that, realize that the validation from others, the validation that you're seeking is not found in the achievement. And I think that's the key thing here. A lot of times we tie other things to these achievements, right? So for me, for example, one of the things growing up was I always wanted to make friends. I always wanted to feel like people knew who I was and wanted to be my friend. And a way that I found to do that was by achieving things that included others in them. The hard part is that once people move on or once that thing ends, a lot of times the people that were connected to the project or the thing that I developed that made me the friends or connected me to people that maybe I felt like I wasn't good at connecting to, they all disappeared because they were connected to the project. I was a part of the project or I was a part of that thing, but we weren't necessarily connected beyond that. And so there's this false idea. You realize that that validation you were seeking, the reason you developed the thing to get the validation you wanted, had nothing to do with the actual thing. It just, you wanted that validation. You wanted to be able to make friends. You wanted to have a community. So you built this thing to achieve that. And you realize real quickly when your happiness and your satisfaction is built off the validation of others around you, you know, it can be taken away real easily as well. I often say this when it comes to relationships, don't go into a relationship insecure, because if you are going into the relationship to feel like you are loved by somebody, right? Which is important. If that relationship fails, if you're not secure in who you are, if you're looking for that person to make you feel like you can love yourself, give you permission to love yourself, well, that's going to be taken away that can be taken away real easily. You'd hope that wouldn't happen, right? But if your loving of yourself was predicated on this person's love for you, well, then you don't really love yourself. You were looking for somebody else to validate and tell you, yes, you can love yourself because I love you. And that can be taken away real easily. If you don't know how to love or accept yourself, you're going to be in a really tough position. So here's what I've learned. And this took me a long time to actually believe, not just know. Like I said, I think this is something that everybody deals with. I think high achievers deal with this more than anyone else. But the thing you're actually looking for, the feeling of being enough, of being at peace with where you are, of actually enjoying what you've built, that's not at the next level. It's not at that next goal. It's not in more revenue or more recognition or more results or more friends or all these things we've been talking about. It's in the present moment. It's in how you're showing up right now, today. It's in whether you're actually present in your own life or just sprinting through on autopilot trying to accomplish the next thing. For most high achievers, this is the hardest thing to hear because the present doesn't always feel exciting. The present isn't impressive. The present is just, it's where you are right now, right? Which feels insufficient when you've built your whole identity around where you're going. If your whole identity was around where I'm going to get to, what I'm going to do next, how can you ever be content in your present moment? It seems like a bore, right? It seems like wasted time. But the truth is, the life you're building is happening right now, not at the next level, but right now. The relationships you're investing in or neglecting, that's happening in the present. The health you're building or eroding, that's also happening right now. The person you're becoming through the work you're doing, that's being shaped right now, not later. And I think that's the piece we miss. We're always looking so far ahead because we think that the thing we really want is out there, that we miss all the things we have right now. And we miss the opportunities that are present to us in that moment. One thing I think is really interesting is there's a great power in the ability to serve. And the reason I say this is because I think it pulls us out of this selfish zone, right? This selfish thought process that has us constantly looking to what am I going to achieve in the future? What am I going to get in the future? And when you go out and think of other people, it really pulls you back into the present moment. And it makes you realize, man, I can do something right now, right here to help somebody else. And in the process, you now are helping yourself. You feel validated. You feel like you've accomplished something, and you're no longer so focused about all these external things, all these future things that are going to make you feel better and give you the things that you don't have. And you start realizing real quickly all the things you do have. And I think that's a powerful concept. And we'll probably explore that more in another episode. I want to dive a little deeper into the power of service and the power of being unselfish. I think there's real power in that. I think we talk about conceptually, we know it's a good thing, but I want to dive into the real details of that. So hopefully we can do that in another episode. If you're not present for your life, if you're always somewhere else in your head, always measuring the gap, always running from the never enough voice, you're going to miss it, all of it. And you're going to look back one day full of accomplishments and wonder why it doesn't feel like yours. You're going to wonder why you have regrets. You're going to wonder why you didn't go out on that trip or spend more time with family. And I think that's the key is it's about accomplishing things in the moment and continuing to build with the people around you. Now, it's not easy. The never enough feeling is fundamentally an identity problem. It's rooted in the belief of who you are and what you think you're worth. And you can't solve an identity problem with a strategy. You can't fix it by hitting more goals or building better systems or working harder. It's just not how it happens. You have to actually change what you believe about yourself at the core. And then you can start to shift and change your identity. Specifically, you have to separate your worth from your output. These two things have been fused together for so long, and the longer you don't deal with this, the longer, the harder it will be that they start to feel like the same thing. But you have to realize they're not. Your worth is not what you produce. Your worth is not your revenue or your results, your achievements. Your worth is undeniable. It's intrinsic to you. It's not earned. It's not conditional. It's something you can't lose by having, it's not something you can lose by having a bad month or a bad week. Like you are an amazing individual. And I think that's why a lot of times Christianity and faith resonates with people because it's somebody telling you that you are loved regardless. God loves you regardless of your circumstances or your flaws. Like you are a special, unique individual and you are, yes, you have flaws, but you are loved. And I think that's what people are searching for because they don't necessarily love themselves and they haven't learned to accept who they are. And faith can really resonate with people in that way because it gives them somebody who can love them regardless of how they feel about themselves. But I will tell you, if you can learn to see, and just put it in faith terms, if you can learn to see yourself the way God sees you or the way your faith sees you, right? Whatever you believe in, what a different scenario, right? Like God or whatever faith you believe in, right? He doesn't see you as a terrible person, right? He loves you. He cares about you. He sees you as this amazing being, as this amazing individual. And if you can see yourself in that way, man, what a game changer. So I want to get specific because this isn't just a mindset conversation. There are actual things you can do to help with this, right? I mentioned faith. I mentioned, you know, having some self-love, but those kind of feel very abstract. You walk away going, okay, great. Like I'm already going to church. I'm already practicing my faith. I read my scripts, like, but it's not changing the fact that I feel this feeling of never being enough. Well, the first thing I want you to do is audit your internal scorecard, right? Kind of give yourself a self check. Most high achievers are running a scorecard in their head that only tracks what they didn't get done, right? You wake up in the morning, you start going through the checklist, and you just feel like an absolute failure from the moment you wake up. What fell short? What's still missing? You never really closed that gap, and it just became the default. So the conscious change would be at the end of each day before you look at what you didn't finish, write down three things you did actually move forward. What three things that happened today that did matter? They don't have to be necessarily the biggest things that, they don't have to be huge, but just real things that you did, progress that you can actually see. I know it sounds really simple and maybe it is too simple, but I think it's that simple, just being able to see progress over time. I worked with a bunch of young adults who had special needs and also a variety of mental health challenges. And one of their biggest challenges that we saw as we worked with them was they felt like they had depression and anxiety and all these problems, and they felt like it was never getting better, and nothing they ever did moved the needle. And so we gave them an application that we designed where they actually had to input and track and monitor each day. I guess in a way it was like a guided journal, but they would actually monitor and track how they felt, where they were at, what things they did that day. They would put in some of these just key factors, these inputs. And so that way, over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, they actually could see over time that yes, they were progressing. And yes, they were doing things that were making their anxiety and their depression better. They were feeling better about themselves. And just being able to see that progress over time made the biggest difference. And they realized that, what, all this time that I thought I was just getting worse and declining actually wasn't true. They were progressing. They just had to see it. They had to visualize it. And the days where maybe they dipped down or they had a bad day, they started to be able to realize, oh, it was because I had a bad experience with my mom or I had an argument with a friend. And wasn't necessarily attached to their mental health challenges. It just happened to be something that occurred in their day-to-day life that maybe made them unhappy. And so being able to see and track progress, I think, is huge. It's something we overlook all the time because it seems so simple, but it actually can make such a big difference. The second thing is separate who you are from what you do. This means building a life that has things in it that aren't about achievements, right? Relationships that where you're not focused on performing, you're just focused on being you. Activities that you just enjoy doing because you enjoy doing them, right? One might call this a hobby. And occasionally resting just for the sake of resting. I think that's something high achievers struggle with. They feel like they can't give themselves permission to take a break. And you got to realize that recovery is key. One of the biggest things in weightlifting or training or athletics is helping athletes or helping the athlete, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily a sport. Could be anything. Realize that recovery is where they make the most progress. If you're not resting, how can your body ever heal and grow to then take on the strain that you put on it, right? Especially in bodybuilding and lifting weights, you go to the gym, you work out, you break down that muscle tissue. But the muscle and the gains are made by refueling, eating, you know, recovering, and then getting the proper sleep. That's where the recovery is at. That's where the gains are made. And so if you skip that key step, and I think this is something we all fall into, if we skip the rest and the recovery, how are you ever going to make the progress? So allow yourself the time to rest and recover from the strain and the load you're putting on it. Third, get honest about what you're actually afraid of. Underneath the never enough feeling, there's usually a fear, a specific one. For some people, it's the fear of becoming irrelevant. If I stop or if I stop producing, I'll disappear. Nobody's going to care who I am, right? That type of thought process. For some people, it's that fear of failure, right? I can't make a mistake. If I let off the gas for a second, it all could fall apart. Once again, this idea that if I mess up or if I do something wrong, it's the end of the world. For some people, it's the fear of being found out, like maybe they're an imposter. Maybe they feel like underneath all this achievement, if they don't keep producing at a high level, like people will find out they're not really as cool as they are, or they're not really as good of a person as people think. And that can be tricky. Like, it's hard. I think people try to hide their flaws. And the best thing we can do is as people realize that we all have flaws. We're so scared to show that, but in reality, we all have something. And if we could all have a little more grace with each other, if we could all have a little more love for each other, I think that would go a long way. But you got to realize that everybody has flaws, right? The best thing you can do at this point is name that fear, identify it, and realize that this drive, this thing that's pushing you forward, it's coming from this other idea, right? This identity, this ideology that you have. And then fourth, measure things differently. Right now, you're probably measuring things primarily from those outcomes. How much money you make, how well you did in your performance, what milestones you achieved, how fast did you run that race. But start also measuring things on who are you becoming and how did you show up? Did you show up in your performance a little bit better this time? Were you a little more dialed in? Did you feel a little more focused? Maybe you felt a little bit healthier or better, or you got more sleep. Did you feel like you handled this project with a little more grace or a little bit better attitude, right? Like those are the metrics that nobody looks at, but they make, in my opinion, the biggest difference. And, you know, that is where the biggest ground is made, right? Because it's about who we're becoming, not necessarily what we're achieving. And I think just by asking those simple questions, right, running through those 4 points, you can start to really break down this false idea that you have to be achieving something great to be accepting of who you are. Now, I want to close by saying something that I think needs to be said. The never enough feeling doesn't stay in your work, it bleeds into your relationships. And often the way it shows up is by how you start treating people. And you've probably seen this. As you get more pressure and put more pressure on yourself to achieve, you start taking it out on the people closest to you. And it can really do damage to marriages, friendships, family, and the people around it because they start feeling like they're never quite enough either. And you have to be careful of that because when you stop living in the present and you start feeling like you're never enough, it's very easy to start acting like nobody around you or anything they do is also enough. And you start to perpetuate this idea into the circles you live in. So here's the reframe I want to leave you with. The drive you have, the ambition, the vision, the refusal to settle, that's not the problem. That's actually one of the things that's very valuable, one of the things that makes you great. The world needs people who don't want to quit. They need people who want to build things and make the world a better place. But that drive needs to be rooted in the right place. When it's rooted in, I'm not enough yet, it's exhausting and it's never satisfying. And it leads to more people feeling like they're never enough. When it's rooted in, I have something real to contribute and I want to give my best, it's energizing. People feel that. You feel it. It's sustainable and it actually feels good. And now you actually want to hit the goal and do the work. That's the real shift. From proving yourself to expressing yourself, from chasing enough to building from enough. You are enough right now, not because you achieved a certain amount, not because you've proven yourself sufficiently or proven yourself to the world, but because your worth isn't on the table. It's not something you can earn or lose. You are worth something, and that's what matters. You are already enough. Once you realize that and you can accept yourself, you can now start to build from a place of being secure, feeling grounded, and really start to build something extraordinary. Not to prove it, but because you have something real to give. Anyways, I hope that's helpful. I know that's something that I struggle with on a regular basis. And I think anybody who's trying to achieve anything is going to feel that way from time to time. It's so easy to be hard on ourselves and feel like our value is tied to something that we can do. If we can switch that gear and we can realize that our value is something undeniable, I think we can accomplish so much more and get so much further together. Hope that helps.